To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.
Hello my dear grade 9 students. So today we are going to discuss about a fresh new lesson about the differences that can be observed within the organisms in our biosphere or in our planet Earth. So this is the 12th lesson of your grade 9 science syllabus. So the 12th lesson is going to reflect about the biodiversity, right? The biodiversity. Diversity means, my dear children, differences. In simple, we can say that the diversity means the differences. So biodiversity means, bio means living actually. So organisms or biological things can be considered as living things. So here mainly we are focusing about, within the lesson biodiversity, about the differences that can be observed between the organisms. Now, when you take organisms we know that we can divide into two main parts as plants and the animals. So first of all, we'll be discussing about different kinds of diversities that can be observed within the animals and as well as plants also, right? So stay with me till the end of the lesson. So like in the previous lessons, at the end of our lesson we'll be discussing questions given in your textbook and plus some extra questions related to the biodiversity lesson, my dear children, right? So like I said, here the biodiversity means the differences. You know that there are different organisms which are living in our planet Earth. So these organisms, right, even though these organisms originated from a single source, there are different kinds of organisms. There are different species of organisms. Like mainly we can divide organisms into, right, especially animals into, right, two different parts. So those animals are vertebrates and invertebrates. We divided organisms into two main categories. However, there are three. You know that there are organisms called microorganisms which cannot be observed from the naked eye, right? So we'll ignore that part, right? So we'll focus about the macroorganisms which are plants and the animals. So once again, I can divide animals into two different categories as vertebrates and invertebrates. And we have even studied about the invertebrates, the groups of invertebrates and the groups of vertebrates, right? So like that, there are several differences and there are several species. So within this lesson, we'll be thoroughly focusing about those differences that can be observed within the biosphere or in our planet Earth, right? Then we are focusing about the plants, right? So plants are also in different types. So we'll be discussing about the differences in plants as well. Mainly here we are focusing about the ecosystems after that. Okay, when we are discussing about the plants diversity of plants and the diversity of trees and the other things, we'll be mainly focusing about ecosystems like forests, grasslands and so on. Okay, right. So this is just a brief, my dear children, okay, about the lesson, about the things that we are going to discuss within the 12th lesson. So when you go further with the things, we'll get to know one category at a time. Okay, right. So the 12th lesson, we are mainly focusing about the biodiversity, right? We are mainly focusing about the biodiversity. Biodiversity reflects about the differences within the biological organisms, right then. So let's observe what are the main categories or what are the main key subtopics that we are going to discuss within this main topic, biodiversity. First of all, we'll be discussing about what kind of a thing is this biodiversity is, right? Like what kind of a thing is it? So that part will be discussed under the introduction of biodiversity. So we'll be get to know what do you mean by the biodiversity. What are the special subcategories that we can observe within the biodiversity part, right? So we'll be discussing and focusing about the introduction of biodiversity first of all. Then, my dear children, we'll be discussing about the importance of biodiversity. Why do we need to learn about this biodiversity? What is the purpose of learning? And also, like, what kind of a benefit does the biosphere receives upon having this kind of differences? What is the reason, right? What are the benefits? And how it would manage the balance in our biosphere or in our planet Earth, right? So we'll be discussing about those things within the importance of biodiversity column, okay, or the part, right? That's under the importance. Then, my dear children, we'll be discussing about threats to biodiversity. Threats, right? Or what are the harmful things that would threat the biodiversity. So mainly we can divide actually these things into two main categories as human activities and natural things, right? So natural disasters like the floods, earthquakes, tsunami waves, and so on. Those things can be considered as threat to biodiversity, because you know that upon a natural disaster, large amount of organisms will die. So therefore, it's going to be a threat to biodiversity, because most of the animals are going to be killed because of these incidents. And even when you take human activities like deforestation, right, then emission of greenhouse gases, and there are lots of things which would impact the biodiversity. So we'll be discussing about those things regarding the threats regarding the threats related to biodiversity. Okay. Then, my dear children, we'll be discussing about the important features of ecosystems. So like I said, right, at the end of the lesson part, we'll be focusing about the ecosystems. After discussing about the biodiversity, we'll be discussing about the ecosystems. What are the types of ecosystems? What do you mean by an ecosystem? What kind of a thing is this ecosystem? And how many ecosystems are there? Like when you take the whole planet Earth, okay, this whole planet Earth actually made up with ecosystems. Okay, we won't be able to number like this much of ecosystems, right? We won't be able to number it because there are a large number of ecosystems, right? So actually you don't know still what do you mean by an ecosystem. So when you go with the topic, the ecosystems, I'll be explaining to you what does this ecosystem is, right? So actually our whole biosphere, our whole Earth contains large number of ecosystems, right? We simply, just for now, I'll let you know that ecosystem is an area or else some kind of a thing that organisms are going to live on or thrive on. So such a thing is an ecosystem, right? So we'll be discussing about main ecosystems, right, and their importances, about the, right, important features of ecosystems. Then finally, my dear children, we'll be discussing about natural ecosystems and man-made ecosystems. So what are the natural ecosystems that we can observe? Main natural ecosystems, right? We'll be mainly focusing about ecosystems that can be found in Sri Lanka, my dear children, right? What are the things or what are the ecosystems that can be seen within Sri Lanka? So we can divide these natural ecosystems mainly into two main categories as aquatic and terrestrial. So we'll be focusing about aquatic environments or aquatic ecosystems like rivers, oceans, lagoons, estuaries, and so on. Then we are focusing about terrestrial ecosystems like forests, right, types of forests, then grasslands, and so on. Okay, so these things are only the subcategories, my dear children. We'll be learning about these things in detail when you go further with the lesson. So these are the main topics that we are going to discuss within the lesson biodiversity. Okay, main topics that we are going to discuss about the biodiversity lesson. Right then, so let's move on with the first and foremost topic of the lesson, the introduction. Recall the field visits you attended to study about the environment. During those field visits, you would have experienced different types of environments. They can be beaches, mangrove environments, forest, monsoon forests and grasslands. So I think that you guys have went on certain trips, field trips, right? Sometimes you might have visit Anuradhapura, Kandy, Nuwara, then Mathura, like the Polhena beach, and so on. Okay, so when you go to these places, my dear children, you can observe different kinds of organisms who are living on those environments. Okay, so here mainly, now let's imagine a school trip. Okay, let's imagine a school trip. So if you have been a school trip, most of the times you may visit near a beach or else some kind of a important place. So in that places, my dear children, there are different kinds of things like forest, then historical places, then monsoon forests, then oceans, beaches, and so on. Okay, I think you have studied, I think you have gone to these places. I know that. Even at least for one particular place, right? Then a system that includes all living organisms, biotic factors in an area as well as its physical environment, abiotic factors, interacting with one another as a unit is known as an ecosystem, right? So the definition for an ecosystem is given here, right? A system that includes all living organisms, biotic factors. A system, a place that includes all living organisms, that can be plants, animals, and as well as microorganisms too, right? So a system, a place that includes all living organisms, biotic factors in an area, and as well as physical environment. Physical environment means what? Abiotic factors. What are those things? Like sunlight, wind, soil, sand, water, and so on. Right? So these factors are abiotic factors. Why is that? Because they don't have life. Those things are non-living. Right? So physical environment and living organisms, both should be there. So a system that includes living organisms in an area as well as physical environment, interacting with one another. What do you mean by this interaction, my dear children? Interaction means certain relationships that can be observed within these factors, like living and living relationship. You know that there are some organisms who are living on plants, right, on trees. For an example, like monkeys, birds. So you know that a plant is a living thing, then that particular organism, monkey or parrot or whatever kind of a bird, is also a living thing. So a living thing provides shelter to another living thing. That's some kind of a relationship between those two. If there are no trees in the environment, then those organisms will not be able to survive because they do not have a good shelter, right? So we humans, we build up houses to live on. Okay? We humans, we build up houses to live on. Human settlements. These things, my dear children, are non-living. We know that they are made up with different materials like bricks, cement, and so on, right? So those things are non-living materials. So we interact in non-living materials. We interact. We are going to make some connections. We have certain relationship with our home, right? No matter where you go, you have to visit your home at the end of the day. So we are having some kind of a relationship, some kind of a connection between our physical things. We are living things. House is a physical thing. However, we have a certain connection. So that kind of a thing can be referred as an interaction. So interactions can be living, or else living, non-living, or else non-living as well. You know that when a certain area receives heavy amount of rain, floods will occur. And due to these floods, trees will come down. Okay. Sometimes the soil will get eroded. Okay. Sometimes landslides will occur. So here the land, non-living. Water, once again non-living. But however, due to receiving plenty of water, landslides can occur. So sliding down the land because of water. Soil erosion because of water. So those things are also can be taken as some interactions. However, those things are non-living interactions. Okay. So here, my dear children, what do you mean by ecosystem then? It is a system that includes all biotic organisms or biotic factors or living organisms plus physical environment, factors in the physical environment like wind, that means air, sunlight, water, soil, and so on. Right? So these things interact in each other in a particular single unit. Okay, so that unit is the one which is referred as the ecosystem. Okay, so once again, my dear children, a system that includes all living organisms in an area as well as physical environment interacting one another within a simple unit can be referred as an ecosystem. Right? So this is called as an ecosystem. So what are the examples for an ecosystem? Ocean. Ocean is a good example for an ecosystem. Why is that? Within the ocean there is water. You know that oxygen is somewhat getting dissolved within water. That's how the fishes and all the other aquatic organisms get oxygen from. So water, oxygen, air is there, no? Then at the bottom of the ocean there is sand, I mean soil, okay? Then coral reefs, right? So like that way there are different kinds of physical things, okay? Then there are organisms as well, like what? Like fish, then sea animal, crabs, prawn, coral polyps, right? And so on. So these organisms interacting with those physical environment, factors in the physical environment like water, oxygen, and so on. So an ocean can be considered as an ecosystem. When you take a decaying wood log, okay? So within a decaying wood log, my dear children, there is wood, an unliving factor, right? Even though the plants are living, wood is not a living factor, right? After you cut down a tree, it's not a living factor anymore. So wood, a non-living factor. Within the wood, within those spaces, you can observe small air particles as well. Okay. Then you know that if there are wood, definitely there are termites and other kinds of insects which thrive on the wood. So there are living things and as well as non-living things. So a decaying wood log can also be considered as an ecosystem. Even our bodies are also ecosystems. How come? Because within our body there are dust particles. You know that plenty of air is coming and also there is plenty of air in our atmosphere, and those air particles are interacting with our skin, with our body. And there are a large number of microorganisms who are living on your skin right now. However, we won't be able to observe them from our naked eye, right? So our body skin can also be considered as an ecosystem for certain type of organisms, okay? Right. Then for some people, right, even the hair and our heads can also be considered as ecosystems. For some, not for the all, right? For some, like insects, sometimes, and also for some microorganisms, right? There are plenty of microorganisms who are living on our skin. Even we won't be able to observe those things from our naked eye because we have to use a microscope in order to observe those things. So even a skin of a person, head of a person can simply taken as an ecosystem. Okay, so these ecosystems are, now you got an idea about the ecosystems. Then when you are thinking about these ecosystems, my dear children, I know that you might think about like how many number of ecosystems are there. So that's why I told you that we won't be able to number it. There are a large number of ecosystems throughout the world. Okay, these are just few examples. There are plenty of ecosystems. Actually, when you take very simple glass of water, even that can also be considered as an ecosystem, right? Okay then, so these are the ecosystems, my dear children. So within an ecosystem, remember, there are relationship between living, non-living, and non-living factors. Okay, so all of these things interacting with a certain single unit can be referred as an ecosystem. So in order to be an ecosystem, there should be living factors and as well as non-living factors. Okay, right then, so here several ecosystems given, my dear children. Okay, so here you can observe a forest. So within a forest, you know that there are streams, water, sand, rocks, soil, air, non-living factors. Then there are animals, plants, fungi, algae, living factors, right? So all of those factors, living and non-living, interacting with each other within the forest. So forest can simply be considered as an ecosystem. Then, my dear children, a mangrove environment, right? That is also somewhat related to the forest. Same factors can be observed. So also a mangrove environment can also be considered as a ecosystem. Okay, as an ecosystem. Then a grassland, then a beach, right? So these things are considered as ecosystems, my dear children. Even these things are somewhat large ecosystems, no? So there are different varieties of organisms who are living on these environments. Okay, so actually we are discussing about these main ecosystems within this lesson part. Okay, right, so these are the main ecosystems that we can observe within our planet Earth, my dear children. Okay, the main types of environments or ecosystems. So all of these things are natural ecosystems. Naturally we can be able to, or we will be able to, we will be able to observe these things naturally in our environment or in our biosphere, right? There are some man-made ecosystems as well, like when you take an industrial plant or an industrial environment, right? Simply a company. Now a company can be considered as an ecosystem because within a company there are machines, there are people, sometimes there can be protective dogs and other kinds of organisms, right, like cats who are living on those kinds of areas, right? I'm talking about an industrial environment, like so within these industrial environments there are living things and as well as non-living things. However, this environment was made by human, so there is an artificial ecosystem or else it's a man-made ecosystem. Okay, so not only natural ecosystems, my dear children, there are man-made ecosystems as well. Okay, there are man-made ecosystems as well. However, man will not be able to produce living things, but however all the other physical factors or physical environment was created by man, so therefore we consider those things as man-made ecosystems. Okay, so not only those things like agricultural lands and also human settlements areas like housing schemes, those things also can be considered as man-made ecosystems, my dear children. Okay, so remember, there are natural ecosystems like mangrove environments, beaches, grasslands and forest, and also there are man-made ecosystems like industrial lands, then human settlement areas, then agricultural lands and so on. Okay, right, so these are the examples for ecosystems, my dear children. So first of all, we'll be discussing or focusing about these natural ecosystems. Okay. But before that, my dear children, first of all, we should know what kind of a thing this biodiversity is. Okay. So this is a brief introduction for an ecosystem. Now let's head on with the biodiversity part then. So first of all, before we are going to discuss about the biodiversity thing, let's discuss about the ecosystem diversity. Ecosystem diversity. So like I said, diversity means differences. So in ecosystem diversity, we'll be discussing about different types of ecosystems. What are the differences in ecosystems? So here, when different ecosystems are considered, the animals and plants in these systems are varied. Also, the physical environment and climatic factors of those systems are also different. The diversity among these ecosystems is known as ecosystem diversity. Now we are going to learn about biodiversity, right? So when we are discussing about biodiversity, it's important to learn about the ecosystem diversity as well. Okay. So what do you mean by this ecosystem diversity? You have studied about several ecosystems in the earlier part. So now you know what does this ecosystem is, right? Like what kind of a thing this ecosystem is. So ecosystem is a place which the living and non-living factors are going to interact each other. Okay. So there are different ecosystems in our biosphere or in our planet Earth, and also, my dear children, these ecosystems are different from one another, from climatic factors, from number of organisms who are living and the types of organisms who are living. Okay, so if one ecosystem is way more different than the other ecosystem, even though they are same ecosystems. We'll take two forests. So two forests can be considered as one type of an ecosystem. However, those two forests are also having differences among those factors, like the environment factors, physical factors. One forest will have more number of streams rather than the other. So within that number of streams, there can be plenty of organisms, plenty of aquatic organisms who are living. And in the other one, we won't be able to observe like aquatic organisms like that much in that much of an amount. Okay. So by that way, there are different factors that's going to differ in each and every ecosystem, right? We won't be able to observe, or there will not be any ecosystem that has the same particular features in a different place. You won't be able to observe those things. Okay. So within ecosystems, my dear children, there are certain differences. So these differences which can be observed within ecosystems. Okay. In here, as given in the slide, my dear children, with different ecosystems, there are different types of animals and plants. And also, the physical environment and the climatic factors in ecosystems are also going to change. So the diversity among these ecosystems are the ecosystem diversity, right? Ecosystem diversity means that it's very simple. The differences between ecosystems or living places. Okay. So this is ecosystem diversity, my dear children. Then we'll focus about the next one. What is that? The species diversity. Species diversity. Okay. A species is a type of an organism who is living on our planet Earth. That's the simple and the brief explanation for a species, right? For a species. So human beings are species, right? Human beings is a type of an species, right? It's a type of a species. Dogs, type of a species. Cats, type of a species. Then mangrove plants, like Kiral, a type of a species. Cuddle, a species, right? Cows, like that way, like different types of organisms or different types of plants and animals can simply be considered as a species, right? A species. So here it is given, think about the living organisms in ecosystems. So like I said about the cats, dogs, about about the plants like coconut, jack, mango and so on. In ecosystems, there are many species of animals and plants as well as many species of microorganisms. So not only plants and animals, my dear children, there are different kinds of microorganisms as well. Algae, fungi, bacteria and so on, right? So even we can observe different species of microorganisms as well, not only plants and animals, okay? With regard to these species, there is a great variety of characteristics in the body shape, size, nutritional patterns, and the reproduction. So there are different characteristics in the body shape. So when you take the body shape from one body shape to another, in a particular in the same species also these things can change, and in different species, so of course it's going to change, right? When you take an elephant, it has a heavy or else a larger body size. However, for a dog, somewhat smaller. For a mouse, even smaller. For an ant, even very smaller. So from species to a species, body size is going to change. Not only the body size, my dear children, their shape. Then the nutritional patterns. Nutritional patterns means, in simple, we can say that we eat food. Okay, what are the type of food that we eat? We can eat any kind of flesh, right? Normally, usually we eat flesh, okay? Actually, man or the human can eat any kind of a flesh, okay? That's how the man has been created by the environment or by our nature, okay? Ancient people ate any, like when you take flesh, they ate any kind of a flesh. So humans, they eat flesh and as well as plants, right, and fruits and so on. So we have varieties of foods. So our nutritional pattern is somewhat different from other organisms. Like what organisms? When you take a cow is going to eat only plant parts, they are not feeding on flesh. In our previous grades, like in grade 6, 7, we studied about these organisms under the categories of carnivorous organisms, right? Carnivorous animals actually, carnivorous animals, then omnivorous animals, and then herbivorous animals. So think about those organisms, my dear children. So carnivorous animals, they depend on or they feed on flesh, right? So like lion, tiger, those kinds of animals. So their nutritional pattern is way more different than us. Okay. Then herbivorous organisms like cow, goat, deer. So those organisms, they feed on plants. So their nutritional pattern is somewhat different. Okay. Their nutritional pattern is somewhat different. Then omnivorous organisms like man, monkey, crow, magpie, then cockroach, and so on. So as you can see here, nutritional pattern is also going to change from one particular species to another one. Okay. So nutritional pattern is also a factor which is getting changed from one particular species to another. Then, my dear children, reproduction. The method of reproduction. Some lay eggs. Some give birth to young ones. Okay. So like that way, there are different types of reproductive patterns. So these reproductive patterns also vary from one particular species to another. Okay. Right then, the diversity among these species is known as the species diversity. So all the factors that we discussed right now under the differences of species is simply referred as the species diversity. So species diversity means, my dear children, those are the differences that can be observed from one particular species to another one. Okay, the species diversity. Right then. So we have studied about ecosystem diversity, then the species diversity. Differences between ecosystems, differences between different kinds of species or types of organisms. Ecosystem diversity, different types of ecosystems. Species diversity, different types of species. Okay, so two factors. Then the next one. Before that, my dear children, you are given with several species here. See, a bacterium, enlarged bacterium. Observe the structure of that. Then grass, a species. Then a coconut tree, way more different than grass, right? Then ulva, type of an algae. Snail. Then a parrot. So when you observe these organisms, my dear children, you can see that there is a variety, or there is there are several differences between one particular organism to another, that particular organism to another different one. Okay, even though they belong to the same category, now both of these things belong to the plants. However, from one particular species to another, there are huge difference. There is a huge difference. Snail and parrot, both are animals. However, this one to this one, there is a huge difference. So this is the species diversity, my dear children. Okay. Next one then. So you are given with an assignment. Select a plot of land in your area or school, thicket, grassland, pond. Study the species diversity in the selected plot of land. Using all your observations, fill in the table given. So you have to select like one ecosystem, okay, from your area or from your living land, or else from your school. Then you have to complete the table according to the species or according to the type of organisms which can be observed within that particular environment. Okay, so here it is given for your convenience: plant species, animal species, and microorganisms. So living organisms are categorized as plants, animals, and microorganisms. In this field visit, you should follow your teacher's advice without harming the environment and ensure your safety. So now it's important, when you are visiting to a certain place, my dear children, it's important to protect that place, right? So sometimes there can be valuable things within that particular place. So we have to protect the environment. Okay, don't litter or don't put any kind of waste materials to that places. Protect your environment. That's very compulsory. And as well as, my dear children, the safety. Okay, safety is also should come first. Okay, right then. So let's imagine and we'll write down several things, right, that can be observed within a certain ecosystem. Now let's imagine that we are going to visit to a certain beach. Okay, now we are visiting a certain beach. Now we are on a beach. So in a beach, what are the plant species that can be observed? For sure, we will be able to observe coconut, right? Coconut. Coconut. Then sometimes some palm trees can also be observed, right? Or else in Sri Lanka we won't be able to observe those things, no? Then Vatakeia. Sometimes mangrove plants. Right, mangrove plants. So these are some kinds of plants that we can observe, right? that we can observe within a certain area or within a seashore, okay, or else in a beach. Different kinds of plants that we can mainly observe, right? Then, my dear children, the animal species, okay, animal species. What are the types of animals, or who are the types of animals that we can observe, right? Animal species. We will be able to observe for sure some crows, okay? So, crow within a seashore or else in a beach, definitely we will be able to observe crow. Then seagull, right? Seagull. Then sometimes crabs, small crabs running here and there, wandering here and there within the beach. So crab. Okay. Bivalves. Right? Bivalves. Then for sure we'll be able to observe fish. Sometimes turtles also, right? Then microorganisms. There are plenty of microorganisms living here and there, right? So we can write algae. Algae for sure, right? Then different kinds of fungi, bacteria, definitely we'll be able to observe these three categories. And sometimes, right, some protozoans as well, okay, unicellular organisms. So these are several species that we can observe, my dear children, okay. These are several species that we can observe in a beach. So in a beach, we will be able to observe these plant, animal and microorganisms. Okay. So my dear children, these are the types of species, plant and animals and also microorganism species that we can observe within a certain ecosystem. Okay. Right then. We are given with another activity then. Let's see what is this. Observe the external features given within the table of all your classmates and fill in the table. Have the ability to roll the tongue. No ability to roll the tongue. With hanging earlobes, with attached earlobes. With black eyes, with brown eyes. With straight hair, with curly hair. Right-handed, left-handed. So here you are given with different kinds of features. Okay. Here you are given with different kinds of features. So within these features, my dear children, you will be able to observe, right? Here within these features, you will be able to observe there are some humans. Actually now here we are discussing about your classmates now. So there are some friends of yours. Those friends will be able to, some of those friends will be able to do each of these things, or these factors are present, positive. Sometimes in some friends of yours, right, these factors cannot be observed or absent. These factors are absent. Like what? Some might have the ability to roll the tongue, but some might not have the ability to roll the tongue. So rolling the tongue is like this. Now you can take the tongue out like this, then do like this. Okay. So if you can do it, then you put a tick. Okay. If your certain friend can do it, then you put a tick. If not, then you put a cross. Okay. So by that way, you can count how many number of classmates or your friends that have the ability to roll the tongue. Okay. So by that way, you can complete the number. Right. So when doing this activity, you will find out that some of your classmates will have the ability and some They don't have the ability. In the same way, go for the second one. Hanging earlobes and attached earlobes. So hanging earlobes, earlobe means like this. So this is our earlobe, my dear children. So here, this is a hanging earlobe. Why is that? Because you can see that the earlobe, there is a part of the earlobe which has been like separated from the skin, from our face, like here. So here, sometimes in some humans, okay, when you are doing this activity, you might find in some people or in some students of yours, right, the earlobe is like this, attached to the skin of our face, like this, okay. So there are no any free part like this hanging, okay. It would be attached like this. So attached earlobe, free earlobes, okay. Then another one with black eyes and brown eyes. So when you go and look at their eyes, you can observe the color, the iris color of a certain person. So the iris color usually black. However, there can be several other people who is having different color. So you have to record those. How many are there with brown eyes and how many are there with black eyes? Okay. Then the next one, straight hair, curly hair. Okay. So straight hair. Some might have thin and straight hair. Some might have curl like rounded hair. Okay. So what you have to do? Once again, you have to count. Then the next one, right-handed, left-handed. How many people are there right-handed and how many people are there left-handed? Definitely fill this table, my dear children. When you are studying this lesson, right? When you go to school at least, definitely try out this table. Try to complete this table. By completing this table, you will definitely understand that even though there are same number of students or even though their species are going to be same, we know that we are humans. So all humans belong to a same species called Homo sapiens sapien. Even though we belong to the same species, my dear children, there are different features among our humans. These are examples for those particular features, differences. Some might be able to roll the tongue, some can't. Some have curl hair, some have straight hair. When you go to a different country, right? When you go to a different country like New Zealand, Australia, England, in those countries, people have a very white skin. Skin complexion is way more different than us. If you take a person who is living in Africa, skin complexion is even more different than us, and also from a person who is living on a country like England, Australia or so. So the skin complexion is changing from one particular organism or one particular human being to another. Okay. So these factors, my dear children, they would reflect these changes or these differences. These are going to reflect the differences between the same species. Differences between the same species. This is same species we are talking. Okay. Right. So that's why I told you that try to do this activity for sure and identify these differences. Okay. Right. I hope that you will follow up the activity then. Okay. So what is the reason for having these kinds of differences even though those organisms belong to the same species? Like in humans, now we are humans, no, human beings, even though human beings have originated from a same species, we have differences. So these differences are coming or these things are coming, these factors are coming from our previous generations. If you have the ability to roll the tongue, definitely your mother or father or else somebody in your generation should have the same ability. It's not going to be, it's not compulsory to have that ability for your mother or father. Anybody in your generation, anybody in your certain inherited, anybody in your whole heredity, right? Anyone. It can be your grandmother, grandfather, sometimes your uncles, anyone in your generation. Okay, definitely they should have that ability. So you'll be learning about these things in grade 10, my dear children, in detail when we are discussing about the lesson, the last lesson, 20th lesson, right? So when we are discussing about the 20th lesson, the last lesson about the inheritance, we'll be learning about these factors for sure. Up to now, I'm going to give you a brief about these differences. So these differences that can be observed within the same species is referred as the genetic diversity. Genetical diversity. So modern man belongs to the species Homo sapiens sapiens. We know that. Modern man belongs to the species called Homo sapiens sapiens. Through the above activity, you would have understood that even within the same species, there are differences among the individuals. So, in the previous activity, like we discussed, there are some certain number of students or people who can do different kinds of stuff like fold in the tongue. Okay. However, there are certain number of people who don't have that ability. There are certain number of people who have attached earlobes. There are certain number of people who have free earlobes. Then some number of people are right-handed, some are left-handed. Okay, some have curly hair, some have straight hair. In some people, skin complexion is somewhat darker. In some people, the skin complexion is somewhat fairer. Okay, so these features are referred as, or these differences that we can observe within the same species is referred as, my dear children, genetical diversity or genetic diversity, right? So the reason for these differences of a certain species is genetic diversity. So we receive these things from our previous generations. It can be any generation, like your mother or father, or grandmother or grandfather, or from their father or mother, any generation. However, we'll be receiving these from our previous generations. It can be any, okay? Not only from your mother or father. So, as you can see within the figure, you can observe there are several differences between their ethnic groups, right? There are different ethnic groups who are living in our planet Earth. So, within that ethnic groups, you can observe these differences. Some might have like this kind of a blonde hair. Skin is very fair. When you take this person, skin is fair. However, she has black hair. This one, skin is, or the complexion is much darker, and he has curly hair. Same over here. Then way more different in here. Straight hair, fair skin, right? When you observe these two, you can observe a plenty of difference, right? There's a plenty of difference between these two people, right? So my dear children, all of these factors are received from our previous generations. All of these factors received from our previous generations. I think you have heard about the term called DNA and genes. So genes and DNA are the ones who are responsible for these factors, for having these factors. Okay. So genes or DNA are received for you guys from your mother and from your father. And they received their genes and DNA from the previous. And like on, the chain is going to continue. Okay. So these features are unique from one generation to another. So therefore, my dear children, even though we belong to the same particular species, when the generations are going to change, we will have different features within our body structures. These features are coming from genes and DNA. Therefore, these differences are referred as genetic diversity or genetical differences. Right then. So, for the extra knowledge, once again it is given. You already know that living organisms are made up of cells. All of us are made up with cells. Not only us, but also any kind of living organism is made up with cells. So, chromosomes, important thing, my dear children. Chromosomes. Chromosomes are located in nucleus of these cells. Nucleus is a part, when you take a cell, let's do a cell. Cell is like this, no? This is a simple cell. So within a cell, within the midpoint, like in the middle of the cell, this is for an animal cell, okay? So when you take a cell, like at the middle of the cell, you can observe the brain of the cell, which is called as the nucleus. Nucleus. Okay. So nucleus is the one which is going to behave as the brain of a cell, brain of a particular cell. That means nucleus is the one which controls all the metabolic activities that is going to happen within the cell. Okay, within the nucleus, my dear children, there are like these kinds of thread-like structures which are referred as chromosomes. Chromosomes. Okay, chromosomes. Within the nucleus, you will be able to observe these chromosomes. However, my dear children, chromosomes will not be able to observe from naked eye. Even we won't be able to observe cells from our naked eye. No. So we have to use microscopes. Okay. When observing through a light microscope also, you won't be able to observe these chromosomes. So therefore, actually we will be able to observe chromosomes only through electron microscopes. Only through electron microscopes, okay? So you won't be able to observe chromosomes. However, my dear children, if you go and find, or if you Google it as chromosomes, then you will definitely find out several figures related to chromosomes, okay? So chromosomes are included within the nucleus of a particular cell. Okay, within the nucleus you can observe the chromosomes. So let's see what are the importance of these chromosomes. Genes are located on these chromosomes. Now the things which give us those special factors or features from our previous generations. Genes, okay, genes, DNA. Those things are located within the chromosomes, my dear children. Within these thread-like structures, we can observe chromosomes. Okay, we can observe genes. These are thread-like structures. These are the chromosomes. So within these chromosomes, we can observe genes or DNA. Right. The features of living organisms are controlled by genes. So like I said, all the features in a living organism can be observed or controlled by genes. Genetic diversity is the cause for the differences among organisms within the same species. So genetic diversity is the cause for the differences among organisms in the same species. So like I said, my dear children, this genetical diversity is coming mainly because of having different genes in our body. So these genes are observed within the chromosomes. Okay, genes are observed within the chromosomes. Okay, so chromosomes contains DNA. Within DNA, you can observe genes. That's how it goes. So we'll be learning about these genes and other factors, about the inherited patterns and generations, things related to the 20th lesson in your grade 10 syllabus. Okay, up to now this is just a brief. So genes are the ones which are responsible mainly for the genetical diversity, my dear children. Genes from one particular person to another is going to different, at least by us 1%. Okay, so genes are the main reason for having this genetical diversity or genetic diversity, my dear children. Okay, right then finally we have discussed all the things related to the biodiversity part. Now it's time to get some idea about what kind of a thing is this biodiversity is. So my dear children, you are given with the topic biodiversity. There is a diversity among the ecosystems that organisms live, and there is a diversity among the living species. Not only that, there is a diversity among the organisms of a same species. So there is species diversity, then ecosystem diversity, right? Ecosystem diversity, species diversity, and as well as there is diversity among the organisms of a same species, which is the genetic diversity. Okay, so all of these differences that can be observed within the ecosystem diversity, species diversity, and genetical diversity is referred as the biodiversity. So biodiversity is a combination of ecosystem diversity, species diversity, and the genetic diversity, my dear children. All of these differences collectively referred as the biodiversity, the differences between different kinds of organisms living in our planet Earth. It can be any ecosystems, species, genetic, any kind of a difference can be mainly considered as biodiversity, right? Biodiversity, my dear children. So this is the meaning of biodiversity. The differences between organisms living in our planet Earth. It can be ecosystem, species, or else genetic. Okay. So this is the biodiversity, my dear children. Right, my dear children. So I hope that you got the idea about the biodiversity then, right? So this is the introduction, the first and foremost topic, about the introduction related to the biodiversity. So remember, biodiversity is consisting different kinds of categories like species, genetical, ecosystem, and so on. So mainly we have focused about those three differences, those three categories under the biodiversity. So biodiversity means all of these differences that can be observed within the living organisms. Right then, so we have finished the first chapter, my dear children. We have discussed all the things related to the introduction of biodiversity. So in our next chapter, my dear children, we'll discuss about what are the importance of this biodiversity, like what are the benefits that we are going to obtain upon having these differences in the organisms. Okay, right. So we'll discuss about the importance of biodiversity in our next chapter then.
To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.